Good morning and welcome to Global Perspectives. From my home studio, I'm David Dumke.
And I'm Katie Coronado.
Today we are joined by the former Prime Minister of Ireland, who served from 1997 to 2008. Bertie Ahern was instrumental in the Good Friday Agreement, which brought peace to Northern Ireland. He oversaw the Irish economy's rapid growth, and he's been instrumental in the European Union. From Dublin, thank you for joining us, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good morning to you, David and Katie. Nice to be on your program.
Thank you. So I wanted to start with Ireland's economy has been so tied to the United Kingdom, and you're also a member of the EU. So, what are the repercussions of Brexit on Ireland? And a little further, what does Brexit mean for the possibility of Irish unity with Northern Ireland?
Well, I suppose, the first thing in our view, Brexit is bad for everybody. It's bad for Britain, in our view. We respect their vote, but we don't see the great benefits for them. From us and our perspective, it's a very bad because we do a huge amount of business with the UK. It's not what it used to be historically. Maybe about 20-25% of our trade now, but it's still a close market, and particularly for agriculture and food products, and a lot of the smaller SME kind of businesses that don't go outside of any distance, they export to the UK, trade with the UK. And of course, for the European Union, we think that any breakup of the European Union is not good. So overall, the assessment in Ireland, and this is backed up by several European and independent economic analysis. Though, listen, we have to live with it. They've made that decision. The problems it creates is a huge amount of our goods now will have to go across the UK. You have to go through all the regulatory arrangements, all the bureaucracy and paperwork that will be there for hauliers, for exporters, for importers. And of course, it'll create the difficulties for all of the other countries in Europe, though I think it's generally recognised or unanimously recognised now, I think a few years after Brexit vote of 2016, that we're the most affected. We have to get on with it, but it's bureaucracy, it's regulation, it's not having the same rules that we did before, and the UK. The uncertainty in the UK how they're going to handle Brexit when they've finally left, when the transition period ends on the 31st of December. So all in all, it creates uncertainty for us, and certainly is something that we could have done without.
Could there be a silver lining, though? I know Brexit was not popular in Northern Ireland. Could this be because of Brexit? Could you have more unity of mind between nationalists and unionists?
Well, I think what Brexit has certainly done on the question of unification, it has put it on the agenda like it never was before. Probably decades ago, since there was so much talk about unification. Though, the Good Friday Agreement has a certain position that when the people of Northern Ireland, um, without any interference from either from the south of Ireland or from Britain, make a decision, that would be honoured by all sides. But I would love to say to you, David, that there's a big change of heart in by the unionist and loyalist communities in Northern Ireland. That is not there. I think there's more debate, there's more discussion. It's been articulated in university campuses and others, but there is not a change of feeling. I think the unionist majority, and it's just about a majority nowadays, would still see themselves part of the United Kingdom. The nationalist minority, which is a very sizable minority now, still see themselves aligned to Dublin, as they see it, the Dublin government, the Republic of Ireland.
Do you think that that would change for any particular reason? What would make that change from your perspective actually happen? They're individualists, they see themselves specifically the way that they were before, even though these changes have happened. What do you think would create that unification that's needed?
Well, I think there are a number of things from the economic point of view, the trade point of view. I think business people in Northern Ireland they liked the original Theresa May agreement, and they probably liked the withdrawal agreement. They would have been preferred with the Theresa May's proposals because that allowed effectively Northern Ireland to be able to work with the United Kingdom, the rest of the United Kingdom, and also to work with the European Union. So they had a bit of jam on both sides of the bread. They had a lot of the advantages of trading with the United Kingdom, which is their big trade market. There's no doubt about that, more so than the Republic. And they had the opportunity to trade with the European Union as they did before. Now that was changed when the backstop changed, the famous backstop. That meant that the United Kingdom still had a different relationship with Northern Ireland than they had with anywhere else. And Northern Ireland had a different relationship with the European Union. So that's the economic point of view. But I think where the difficulty is the historical position, the old divide, and that hasn't switched much. I think it is making more sense to the younger generation. And when we have COVID-19 now, people are seeing that if we had a more unified system for health, we wouldn't have the difficulties along the border where we've big incidents of COVID-19 on both sides of the border. So I think younger people are seeing that. Are they changing? Are they saying they would like a united Ireland tomorrow? No, they're not. Now, to answer your question, Kate, I think the big issue, this will have to be over maybe a generation of persuading, of working together, of cajoling people, showing that we're not enemies, that we can share this small little space in the world, and that we can communicate and work to a shared dialogue and to understand each other's traditions. Unfortunately, in my estimation, 23 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, we're still a long way to go on that, and that cultural change, that identity change, that's going to take another good period of time.
Let's go back to that time when you helped broker the Good Friday agreements. What were some of the ingredients that made you successful? This has been a long-standing conflict, and it involved, both political differences, but also differences of identity that you just referred to.
Well, I think a number of things, but not to go through them all. The first, I think we were lucky that Bill Clinton was there, Tony Blair was there, and I was there, and the three of us got on well. We personally had good chemistry between us. We were able to differ, particularly Tony Blair and I, but without arguing. We were able to debate the issues and work together, and we didn't work separately. While I obviously worked closely with nationalists and Republicans, and he worked with unionists and loyalists, we tended to have most of our meetings, probably 90% of our meetings, together. So nobody could play us off, and that helped in the negotiation process. As well as that, both Tony Blair and I decided from day one, when we were in opposition, when we were working up what we would do if we were elected to power in 97, we decided that we'd give this one huge shot, and then we'd see where we were, and if we were getting nowhere, I suppose things would have moved on. But we decided that we would try and get everyone to the negotiating table. I think the biggest thing when you look back now, why others failed, we succeeded, was that we took the chance, and it was a chance of inclusivity. We brought those who had been involved in violence from the Republican side, those who were close to the IRA from Sinn Féin, and those who were close to the loyalists from the Ulster Democratic Party and the Progressive Ulster Party. We brought them into the talks once they signed up to George Mitchell's principles of nonviolence. Now, that wasn't perfect. I mean, these people didn't say one day we're all involved in violence and the next day we're all peaceful. Unfortunately, it wasn't so easy. So there was that grey area that we had to maneuver around. But to answer the question, I think, looking back now a quarter of a century, it was that we had an inclusive process, and those who had been engaged in violence, or at least those who represented them politically, we brought them into the process. That didn't happen in the 70s or in the 80s when other efforts were made.
How did you create that level of inclusivity when the two sides were so set in their ways? What do you think stands out? You mentioned going to meetings together. I think that that creates a perception of a start of unification. But what else do you think behind the scenes happened to get people to realize that that was the way to go?
Well, I think, maybe we didn't realize it at the time, but I think the fact we were open, we spoke to everybody. We spoke to the women's groups, the trade union groups. We spoke to those that didn't consider themselves part of any group. We went to the farmers, we went to the employers, we went to the unemployed. And I think, uh, I think the people saw us as at least honest brokers that were trying to make a settlement. Now, 2 weeks before, I mean, the Good Friday Agreement talk started in the beginning of September, about this time of the year, and it went on right up until April. And it was kind of non-stop except for the Christmas period. And so I think over that period, people were saying, like, this is an opportunity. But a few weeks before the finalization of the talks, opinion polls were still saying 90% didn't think we'd succeed. So, in the end of the day, it was probably a few breaks here and there. The second thing I think was important, that we put all the items on the agenda. Now, that was a risk. But it is my belief, because I did a lot of negotiations with trade unions, employers and farmers in my earlier days when I was Minister for Employment or Minister for Finance, and we had a social partnership arrangement. So I tended to, in negotiations, put everything on the list. And Tony Blair and I agreed that we would put the reform of policing, the criminal justice system, the prisoners issue, the equality agenda. We put the kitchen sink, as we say in Ireland, into this. So at least people felt that the issues that were paramount to their difficulties were all on the agenda. And that was risky. And there was many times, I have to be honest and say, that I thought we were mad, but at least it gave everybody that sense that, they were able to see that their issue, their fundamental difficulties and problems were on the agenda.
This is just so impressive to me. It's impactful that you, despite having the poll that said no, 90% of the people are not with you, what made you keep going?
Well, I think George Mitchell, for a start. I mean, George Mitchell was is a great man, and was a great man for us in the negotiations. And I think he was chairing the talks, and George was adamant that we would get to a position where we would have a document people would have to say yes or no to. And in fairness to him, he kept on, even when Tony Blair and I were differing significantly near the end, as you'd expect in these issues. He was encouraging us and enticing us to try and compromise. And I mean, there were big issues at stake. I mean, for me, I had to change our constitution. Articles 2 and 3 of the Irish Constitution, Republic of Irish Constitution, since 1937, laid claim to the jurisdiction of Northern Ireland. Our constitution, and it was held deeply by the people in the south, was that the 6 counties of Northern Ireland were our territory. Now, it might have been meaningless that it was only in the constitution and we never did much about it, but that didn't matter. It was in the constitution. And as you know, when something is in the constitution, people feel fairly linked and tied to it. So that was on Tony's side. He had to say that he was prepared to release Republican prisoners and loyalist prisoners too, but mainly Republican prisoners, and that these people would get out and license and go back into their communities. And that was a big issue, because obviously their security in the UK were worried about that. We had to say that we would totally reform the police. The police service in Northern Ireland, of course, were not liked by Republicans, to say it mildly, but neither nationalists, constitutionalists, nationalists who disagreed with violence also didn't trust the police. So we had to reform the police entirely. And Tony had to say to the unionists, well, the police forces you've had since 1921 is going to be effectively disbanded, and a new one is going to put in its place with different rules and regulations. So the changes were very fundamental, and I think I don't think anybody was saying we got everything on our side and the others, have won or were lost. So I think they were able to say, well, the compromises were fairly even. Now, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people would dispute that statement, but I think you get through the gap when the gap is wide enough to get through it. So I think we probably judged it about right. I wouldn't over sell that, but I think we probably got it about right.
Well, you mentioned George Mitchell specifically, and you started by also mentioning Bill Clinton. But I want to ask you, why was United States' role so instrumental in having the Good Friday Agreement happen?
Well, from 1969 or 68, when the current round of difficulties happened in Northern Ireland, and it's always a dangerous thing when an Irish person what year to take, but we'll take 68 because you could end up in 1107 or 1189 very quickly, and particularly if the Irish are having a row about something. But let's take it 68, 69, where that half century of trouble started. It was, I think, a position where there were so much differences. There was so much arguments. There was so much violence, and one thing led to another, that we were never going to resolve this on our own. Number one, European Union helped, and they financially helped, and they did a lot to help, but that was number two. But Irish America, there's a lot of people from the Unionist and Loyalist tradition have gone to the United States and to Canada too, and a lot of nationalists and Republicans have gone there too. So I think the United States were ideally placed to help. And you have to remember, Dave and Katie, back in 1969, our foreign minister went to the UN, and we pleaded with them for help, and we didn't get any, mainly because the United Kingdom wouldn't agree. And for many, many years, and not to personalize it, but for many, many decades, the presidents of the United States, on all sides, but particularly Republican sides, they tended to listen to the British. And, we're a small country, and we weren't able to get our voice heard. We did to a certain extent, and we had Ted Kennedy, thank God, and, we had Moynihan and others. But, the Brits were bigger and they were better at selling the message. And Bill Clinton, to his credit, listened, and he helped, and he didn't take the British line. And you know all the issues where our ambassador, who is a Kennedy as well, that she went directly to him, and they gave the visas that were crucial at crucial times. So that's the American involvement and the penetration that they put into it and listened to it helped amazingly. And on the last nights of the talks, we had access to Bill Clinton all night, and God, when you think of it, to be getting the president of the free world staying up all night to listen to the Irish bickering and making phone calls at 2 and 3 in the morning American time. It had a big influence, and I think everybody in Ireland was very grateful for that. Should I say, just in the sense of balance, that afterwards George Bush continued on, and I had access to him when I needed him. At that time, we didn't need it as much, but we did get a huge assistance from America, from the administration, the State Department, eventually. But it took Bill Clinton, because traditionally the State Department listened to the Brits more than us, and that's not me being angry or bitter. It's just a fact of life.
Reality. So you're talking about the U.S. role in this particular process, but you also mentioned Irish Americans and their ties to Ireland. How has that made the U.S.-Ireland relationship special over time?
Oh, it's crucial. I mean, the reason we have St. Patrick's Day, which is a world day now, but it was the Irish in America, and in fairness to the Americans that have helped to keep that alive and to make it the biggest day in the year of any foreign group in the United States. But that has helped investment. Irish Americans have, we have practically all of the big ICT companies in the broadest sense of information communication technologies, with the big pharma companies, the down through the years, Dell and Google and Cisco and Amazon and you Intel, and every one of them are here. They're here in huge numbers. They employ massive amounts of people. So are all the pharmaceuticals. I think we've 18 of the top 20 pharmaceuticals in Ireland. And that is hugely down to the connection, the DNA connection that's gone back generations, and the famine between the Irish and Americans. And thankfully, it's as strong today. I mean, you saw when the British decided that they could throw away a withdrawal agreement. The following morning, Nancy Pelosi was down the tubes into their face, and I mean that is just so. Richie Neal, head of the Ways and Means, he was on by lunchtime down their head. So where would we be without that connection? And it's that's not to talk about the tourists and all of the other things that help to make Ireland tick. So America, ancestry, America support. And sometimes people used to think, oh, this is all part of history. It's not. It's part of everyday life between Irish and American. Thank God for it. I think we'd be in a bad way if we hadn't got it.
Prime Minister, Americans and globally, I'm sure that there's an interest in knowing if you have any future plans in politics.
Well, you never say never, but you never say yes either, I think. I'm very involved still in Northern Ireland. I'm involved with Queen's University in the north. I'm involved in a number of think tank groups. I still deal with the political parties on all sides of Northern Ireland. I give a lot of my time now to that. And I'm also involved in conflict resolution. I suppose, haven't been involved in what I've been involved in. I've just finished up chairing of all places in Papua New Guinea, the constitutional referendum there. I've been involved in Ukraine and to a lesser extent in the Arab world, and I've been involved in Turkey as well. So I've been involved in a lot of conflict resolution issues and continue to do that. But I'm getting older, but still trying to stay healthy. But you keep your hand in, and I very much keep my hand in European politics as well.
And so you're consulting and peace agreements if we ever need you for anything.
Well, sometimes successfully, and I say some of the ones I'm involved in hopelessly unsuccessful. But you keep trying, as I think we learned in Ireland. The Lord loves a trier, and we keep trying.
Thank you.
You did mention the EU. So I was asking about Brexit in the context of the UK, but how is the EU's future look right now? You were obviously very active on the Council presidency you headed, which actually drafted a constitution for the EU. Where is the EU going right now?
Well, I think like everything in the world, it's difficult. I think the European Union will continue to be strong. I think they'll continue to be a very powerful bloc of 400 million people. The UK leaving, but definitely is a loss. As an Irish Republican, they'd be maybe surprised for me to say that, but it is a loss. I far prefer them to be in the European Union and to be working with us. So I think European Union now has challenges. It's the first country to leave. It's a large country. It's 70 million people. That changes the relationship. I think it's the European Union will have to handle that carefully over the period ahead. I think as well as that, I mean, my view as I get older, I think the world is going to be in blocks now. I think, you have the European Union, you've America, you know, Latin America, you have the Asian Pacific countries, and I think there's 4 or 5 blocks. It's a bit like a football league, and I think that, you know, you're going to have to be part of one of them, and hopefully we won't continue to have all of the disagreements. I mean, I am a multilateralist. I believe in international organizations. I believe international organizations are good for everybody, but particularly for small countries. I'm a big supporter of the United Nations. And I'm a big supporter of the World Health Organization and the ILO. And, you know, I think these are good for the world. I don't like to see the world being a disparate group and people arguing and undermining it's not good for anybody. And, you know, I hope 2021 we can move back into a more multilateral world, because it doesn't serve any of us breaking up organizations that, in my view, have served the world well for decades.
Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on another episode of Global Perspectives.